The evening sun painted the Wyoming sky in shades of copper and gold as Cole Brennan settled into the worn wooden chair on his porch. At 59 years old, his hands still bore the calluses of a working cowboy, his face carved into deep lines by decades under an unforgiving sun. The Mitchell Brennan Ranch stretched out before him, 700 acres of prime grazing land that had become something far greater than he'd ever imagined, back when he was young and broken and running from everything he'd lost. His grandson Marcus climbed onto the porch railing, 8 years old and already showing the lean frame of a natural horseman. The boy had been quiet all afternoon, the kind of silence that meant questions were brewing. "Grandpa Cole," Marcus said finally, his voice carrying that particular tone of a child working up courage to ask something important. "Teacher gave us an assignment today. Family tree project." Cole took a slow sip of coffee, waiting. He'd learned long ago that the best way to handle a child's questions was to let them find their own way to asking. Some of the other kids, they were talking about their grandfathers. Blood grandfathers. Marcus picked at a splinter on the railing. "I told them you're my grandpa, but Billy Carson said that's impossible because you're not Dad's real father. He said his pa told him you just took Dad in when he was little." The words hung in the cooling air between them. Cole set down his cup with deliberate care. "Billy Carson's pa is right about one thing," Cole said quietly. "I'm not your dad's father by blood, but I am his father in every way that matters." Marcus turned to look at him, those young eyes sharp with intelligence. "How does that work?" Cole leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him in a familiar way. He gazed out at the land, at the mountains purple in the distance, at the life he'd built from nothing but determination and one choice made on a dusty road 27 years ago. "That's a long story, boy. You sure you want to hear it?" "Yes, sir." Marcus settled himself more comfortably on the railing, ready to listen the way children do when they sense something important is coming. Cole was quiet for a moment, gathering the threads of a story he'd told many times, but never quite this way, never with this particular weight of knowing how it all turned out. "It was the summer of 1883, he began, his voice dropping into the rhythmic cadence of a tale told around campfires and on long trail rides. "I was 32 years old. I just lost everything I owned to the worst drought Wyoming territory had ever seen. Had $17 in my pocket, a horse that was nearly as worn out as I was, and a bitter heart that felt like it had turned to stone." He paused, remembering the taste of dust and failure. "I was heading to Montana. Thought maybe I could start over in the mining camps, find some kind of work that didn't involve watching everything I'd built turn to dust and blow away. I'd been riding for 3 days without much sleep, running from my failures the way a wounded animal runs from pain." Marcus leaned forward, captivated. "Then I saw something that changed the course of my entire life." Cole's voice softened. "Two children sitting by a fence post in the middle of nowhere waiting. And in that moment, though I didn't know it yet, I stopped running and started building the legacy you're part of today." The old man's eyes grew distant, seeing not the prosperous ranch before him, but a dusty road and two small figures that had somehow looked like both a burden and a salvation. "Let me tell you how it really happened, Marcus. Let me tell you about the day I learned what it means to be a father." The world seemed to shimmer and fade, and Cole Brennan was 32 again, riding through hell with nothing to lose and everything to find. The Wyoming summer sun beat down without mercy, turning the road into a ribbon of shimmering heat that stretched endlessly toward mountains that never seemed to get closer. Cole Brennan sat loose in the saddle, letting his gelding pick its own pace through the worst heat of the afternoon. The horse was as tired as he was, ribs showing through dull coat, but still putting one hoof in front of the other with the resigned patience of an animal that understood suffering. 3 days since Laramie. 3 days since Cole had signed the papers that transferred the deed of his ranch to the bank, watched everything he'd worked for disappear into the hands of men in clean suits who'd never felt a rope burn or broken a wild horse or spent a winter night checking on calving heifers in a blizzard. 7 years of his life reduced to a stack of legal documents and a handshake that felt like a betrayal of everything he'd believed about hard work and honest effort. The drought had broken him the way it had broken so many others. No rain for months, Welsh's going dry grass turning to powder, cattle dying faster than a man could bury them. He'd fought it as long as he could, but eventually even stubbornness has to bow to reality. So here he was, 32 years old, a professional cowboy with skills that meant something in the territories, but nothing in the world of banks and debts and legal obligations. He'd worked ranches from Texas to Montana since he was 14, knew cattle and horses the way some men knew books could read weather, in the way clouds moved in fine water, by the way certain plants grew. None of it had been enough to save what he'd tried to build. Montana was the plan now. Maybe the mining camps, maybe find work on one of the big spreads up north. Start over, though. Those words tasted bitter, even thinking them. A man shouldn't have to start over at 32. A man should be building, not rebuilding. His hand moved automatically to his canteen, took a careful sip. Water was low. He'd have to find a creek soon, fill up before pushing on. The next town was Clearwater, maybe 15 miles north. Could make it by nightfall if he pushed, but the horse needed rest, and so did he. That's when he saw them. At first, his mind tried to make sense of it, trick of the heat maybe, or exhaustion playing games with his vision. But as his horse plodded closer, the image didn't waver or dissolve. Two children sat on the ground next to a weathered fence post, their backs against the wood, their faces turned toward the road, waiting. Cole's hand moved to the reins, slowing the gelding without conscious thought. Something about the absolute stillness of those two small figures made his chest tighten. Children didn't sit that still. Not unless they'd learned that moving, crying, hoping didn't matter anymore. The boy looked to be about 10, thin as a fence rail with dark hair falling into eyes that tracked Cole's approach with unsettling intensity. The little girl beside him couldn't have been more than fearful. Her face was smudged with dirt, her dress faded and torn at the hem. She held something against her chest, a doll made from rags and string. Neither child moved, neither spoke. Cole brought his horse to a stop, the leather saddle creaking as he shifted his weight. The silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by the wind, moving through dried grass and the nervous snort of his gelding. Then Cole felt it. That prickle on the back of his neck that came from years of staying alive in rough country. The feeling of being watched. He scanned the horizon with practiced casualness, not wanting to alarm the children, but needing to know what his instincts were telling him. There in the distance. Dust cloud, maybe a mile off. Riders coming this way, moving with purpose. The boy's eyes followed his gaze, and Cole saw something flicker across that young face. Not just fear, terror. You kids lost. Cole kept his voice gentle, though his hand stayed near his rifle. The boy's jaw tightened. His arm moved slightly, positioning itself in front of his sister with protective instinct that looked practiced, automatic. No, sir. You waiting for someone? A pause. The little girl whimpered softly, a sound like a wounded animal. Yes, sir. Cole looked past them, scanning the landscape. Nothing but scrub grass and empty plains stretching to the mountains. The fence post they leaned against belonged to nothing, just a single marker standing alone, probably left over from some failed homestead years ago. How long you been waiting? The boy didn't answer right away. His sister shifted slightly, and the rag doll slipped from her grip. The boy caught it before it hit the ground, handed it back with automatic gentleness. When he looked up at Cole again, something in his eyes was older than his years. A while. That dust cloud was getting closer. 3 riders Cole could see now. The way they moved told him they weren't just travelers passing through. What's your name, son? Another pause. The boy seemed to be weighing something, calculating whether truth or silence served him better. Ethan Walker. This is my sister Annie. Pleased to meet you both. Cole kept his voice steady, though his mind was racing through possibilities. I'm Cole Brennan. He pulled his canteen from his belt, held it out. You thirsty? Ethan's eyes locked on the canteen with an intensity that answered the question better than words, but he didn't reach for it. The terror was still there, bright and sharp. They're coming back, Annie whispered, her voice so small Cole almost missed it. Who's coming back, sweetheart? The bad men. Her eyes were huge dark pools of fear. The ones who took Pa's money. Ethan's hand clamped over his sister's mouth, gentle but firm. Annie quiet. Cole dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. The children watched him with the wariness of wild animals ready to bolt, but not quite willing to abandon their position. He crouched down a few feet away, bringing himself to their level. Listen to me, he said quietly. I can see riders coming, 3 of them. You know who they are. Ethan's face had gone very pale. He nodded once. They said if Pa doesn't pay what he owes, they'll take us instead. The words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back too long. Pa left us here 5 days ago, said someone good would find us before they came back. But they keep coming looking. We hide when we see them, but 5 days. These children had been sitting in the sun for 5 days waiting for rescue that hadn't come while men hunted them like prey. What did your pa owe money for? I don't know, something about the ranch. Men came and said he had to sell cheap or there'd be accidents. Pa said no. Then they said he owed them for protection he never asked for. Ethan's voice shook. Ma left 2 months ago when things got bad. Pa tried to keep going, but the men kept coming. Then one day he brought us here and said, wait. Cole could see the riders clearly now, close enough to make out details. 3 men, well-armed, moving with the confidence of people who weren't worried about being stopped or questioned. The math was simple and brutal. He could ride away right now, leave these kids to whatever fate was bearing down on them. Keep heading to Montana to that fresh start he'd promised himself. No complications, no responsibilities, just the open road and the freedom of a man who owned nothing and owed nothing. Or he could stay. Everything in Cole's life had taught him that caring about things led to loss. His parents had died of fever when he was 14. The ranch he'd built had crumbled to dust. Every time he'd let himself want something, hope for something, the world had found a way to take it from him. But there was something older in him than that bitter wisdom, something that had been burned into his soul during years of working cattle drives and sleeping under stars and living by the unwritten code that separated cowboys from common drifters. You didn't leave people in danger, especially children. Get on the horse, Cole said. Now, both of you. Ethan stared at him. What? Those men are coming for you. I'm not leaving you here for them to find. Cole stood, moved to his gelding. You ever ridden? Yes, sir, on Pa's horse sometimes. Good. You'll sit in front, hold the reins. Your sister rides in the saddle, I'll ride behind and keep you both steady. He was already working through the logistics, the weight distribution, how far they could push the horse before it gave out. Why? Ethan's voice was sharp with suspicion and desperate hope mixed together. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Cole paused, one hand on his saddle, and looked at these 2 children who'd been abandoned by a father too broken to protect them, and now faced men who saw them as nothing more than leverage in some scheme Cole didn't fully understand yet. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. That's enough. He lifted Annie first, settling her small body into the saddle. She weighed almost nothing, all fragile bones and torn dress and eyes that had seen too much fear. Then Ethan positioning the boy in front of the saddle where he could help control the horse. Cole swung up behind them, one arm reaching around to hold the reins, the other providing a steady brace. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't ideal. But it would work. The riders were close enough now that Cole could make out their faces. The leader was a man in his 40s, scar running down one cheek, eyes that held the flat, predatory look of someone who'd long ago stopped thinking of other people as human. Cole didn't wait to see more. He spurred the gelding and they lunged forward into a gallop that was probably too fast for an already tired horse, but was the only choice they had. Behind them he heard a shout. The chase was on. The gelding stretched out into a run, hooves pounding the hard-packed earth, sending up clouds of dust that marked their passage like smoke signals. Cole leaned forward over the children, making himself smaller, reducing wind resistance. Annie clutched her ragdoll with one hand and gripped the saddle horn with the other. Ethan's small hands were white-knuckled on the reins. There's a canyon about 2 miles north, Cole shouted over the thunder of hooves. Rocky ground. If we make it there, we can lose them. The riders behind were gaining. They had fresher horses, lighter loads. Cole's gelding was already breathing hard foam beginning to show on its neck. They wouldn't win a straight race, so they wouldn't run straight. Cole veered east toward rougher terrain, rocks and scrub brush, harder going, but better for hiding tracks. The gelding stumbled once recovered. Annie made a small sound of fear, but didn't cry out. Doing good, sweetheart, Cole said. Just hold on. A gunshot cracked behind them. Cole didn't flinch, didn't look back. Warning shot meant to scare. If they'd wanted to hit them, they would have aimed lower, gone for the horse, which meant these men wanted the children alive. That was useful information. He pushed the gelding into a narrow wash, following it north where it curved between low hills. The horse's breathing was labored now, sides heaving. They couldn't keep this pace much longer. Then Cole saw it, an old line shack half hidden in a stand of cottonwoods, abandoned by the look of it, roof sagging but walls still standing. He made a decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Cole doubled back using every trick he'd learned in years of tracking and being tracked. He walked the horse through the shallow part of a creek masking their prints, circled around through rocky ground that wouldn't hold tracks. By the time they reached the line shack, he'd laid a trail that would take skilled trackers time to unravel. He slid off the horse, lifted the children down. Inside, quick and quiet. The shack's door hung crooked on leather hinges. Inside smelled of dust and animal droppings and old wood. There was a crude fireplace, a broken table, nothing else. But the walls were solid, and there was only one door, one window. Defensible. Cole led his horse behind the shack, ground-tied it in the cottonwoods where it wouldn't be immediately visible. Then he grabbed his rifle and canteen and moved back inside. The children huddled in the far corner. Annie's face was flushed-skinned, too hot. Fever, Cole realized. Not good. Ethan, he said quietly, your sister's sick. She ate some berries 3 days ago, wild ones by the creek, made her throw up, and she's been hot ever since. Cole knelt beside Annie, felt her forehead. Burning up, not just sun exposure then. Poisoned by whatever she'd eaten, body fighting it off but losing ground. I need water, he said, fresh and cold. There's a creek nearby. South about half a mile, but the men, I know. Cole moved to the window, looked out. The riders were visible in the distance, circling, searching. They'd lost the trail, but they knew Cole and the children were close. He had maybe an hour before they widened their search pattern enough to find the shack. Cole dampened his bandana with water from the canteen, laid it across Annie's forehead. She whimpered but didn't open her eyes. She'll be okay, he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. I promise. Ethan looked at him with those old eyes and a young face. Why are you helping us? You don't know us. You could have kept riding. It was a fair question. Cole had been asking himself the same thing ever since he'd stopped at that fence post. Because leaving you there wasn't something I could live with, he said finally. Sometimes that's all the reason you need. Through the window, Cole watched the riders draw closer. They were methodical, professional. This wasn't random violence. This was a bah, and they were good at it. The leader pulled his horse to a stop maybe 200 yards from the shack. Even from this distance, Cole could see him studying the ground, reading the terrain. The man turned in the saddle, said something to his companions. They spread out, forming a loose perimeter. Then with casual certainty, the leader turned his horse directly toward the line shack. They know we're here, Ethan whispered. Cole checked his rifle, fully loaded, and he had another box of ammunition in his saddlebag. Not much, but enough for a fight if it came to that. He just hoped it wouldn't. The three riders approached slowly, clearly confident they had their quarry cornered. They stopped about 30 yards from the shack, close enough to talk, far enough but to make rifle shots difficult. The leader was in his 40s, Cole saw now. Scar running from his left eye down to his jaw, the kind of mark a knife leaves when someone's trying to blind you. He sat his horse with the ease of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. Come out, cowboy, the man called. His voice had the flat, nasal quality of someone from back east originally, though. Years in the territories had roughed the edges. No need for anyone to get hurt. Cole stepped to the doorway, rifle held easy but ready. That's close enough. The scarred man smiled, showing teeth that had gone brown from tobacco. Smart man, name's Frank Dobbs. You got something that belongs to my employer. I've got 2 children who were left to die in the sun. Don't see how that belongs to anyone but them. Dobbs laughed, a sound without humor. That's a pretty way to put it. But those kids, their daddy owes a considerable sum of money. They're what we call collateral. Children aren't collateral. They're not property. Law says different when there's debt involved. Dobbs leaned forward in his saddle. William Walker signed papers. Borrowed money he couldn't pay back. Now we're collecting. Something about the way Dobbs said it, too smooth, too practiced, made Cole's instincts scream warning. What kind of men lend money to a rancher they know is failing and then try to collect children when he can't pay? Dobbs's smile widened. The kind that work for Clayton Vance. You heard of him? Cowboy, Cole had. Everyone in Wyoming territory had heard of Clayton Vance. Land speculator, they called him in polite company. Other names in less polite circles. A man who'd made a fortune buying up failed homesteads and ranches at pennies on the dollar, then reselling them to railroad interests and Eastern investors at massive profit. A man rumored to make his own opportunities when nature didn't provide them fast enough. I've heard of him, Cole said carefully. Then you know he's not a man to cross. Dobbs gestured to his companions, both of whom had moved their hands closer to their guns. Now you seem like a reasonable fellow. You're just passing through, caught up in something that's not your concern. Hand over the kids and ride away. No one gets hurt. Through the broken window, Cole could see Ethan holding his sister Annie's small body limp with fever. The boy's eyes were locked on Cole, desperate and trusting in equal measure. Cole had a choice to make. The smart choice was obvious. These were hard men, probably killers working for someone with power and money and influence. Cole was one cowboy with a tired horse and dwindling ammunition protecting two children he'd known for less than an hour. The odds were terrible. The smart move was to walk away. But Cole Brennan had learned a long time ago that the smart move and the right move weren't always the same thing. I got a different proposal, Cole called back. You turn around and ride out. Tell Vance these kids are under my protection now. Come after them, you come after me. Dobbs' smile faded. You're making a mistake, cowboy. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. For a long moment, nobody moved. The afternoon sun beat down, and somewhere a crow called harsh and mocking. Then Ethan stepped into the doorway beside Cole, and the dynamic shifted. The boy held Cole's pistol in both small hands, the barrel wavering, but generally pointed in Dobbs' direction. His face was white, his hands shaking, but his voice was steady. Leave us alone. Dobbs' eyes narrowed, calculating. His hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. Cole saw the moment of hesitation, understood it immediately. Dobbs had been ordered to bring the children back alive. They were leverage insurance, whatever they were calling it. Dead children had no value. And a desperate 10-year-old boy with a loaded pistol was unpredictable. See that boy? Cole said quietly. He's got nothing to lose. His mama ran his daddy left him, and now you're hunting him like an animal. You really want to test if he'll pull that trigger. Dobbs stared at Ethan, and Cole watched the calculation happen behind those predator eyes. Was the boy bluffing? Would he really shoot? And even if he didn't, would one of his companions take a round if Cole opened up with the rifle? The math wasn't in Dobbs' favor anymore. This ain't over, cowboy, Dobbs said finally. He turned his horse, gestured to his men. We know you're heading to Clearwater. Only town for 50 miles. We'll be waiting. He paused, looked back over his shoulder. One more thing. Those kids, they're not just collateral. They're insurance. William Walker witnessed something he shouldn't have. Land deals, property transfers, things that wouldn't look good if they came to light. Long as we got his kids, he keeps his mouth shut. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Clayton Vance don't like loose ends, Dobbs continued. Walker's a loose end, but a live loose end with kids we can get to. That's manageable. You take those kids, you make Walker a problem again. You make yourself a problem. Cole kept his rifle steady. I'll manage. Dobbs laughed, that humorless sound again. You're a dead man cowboy, just too stubborn to know it yet. Then he spurred his horse and rode north, his two companions following. They didn't look back. Cole waited until they were out of rifle range before he lowered his weapon. Behind him, Ethan carefully set down the pistol, his whole body beginning to shake now that the danger had passed. Was it loaded? The boy whispered. Every chamber. Cole turned to look at him. You would have really shot him, wouldn't you? Ethan's jaw set hard. For Annie, yes, sir. For my sister, I'd do anything. Cole felt something shift in his chest, some wall he'd built around his heart beginning to crack. This boy, 10 years old, willing to become a killer to protect his sister. That kind of courage, that kind of love, it deserved to be protected. You did good, Cole said. Took sand to stand there like that. Thought you were going to give us to them. Never even considered it. Annie stirred in the corner, making small sounds of distress. Cole knelt beside her, felt her forehead again. Still burning hot. She needed medicine, a real doctor, cool water and rest in a real bed. She needed things Cole couldn't provide in an abandoned line shack. We need to move, he said. Those men will be back probably with reinforcements. Clearwater is our best shot. Sheriff there might be able to help. Pa said never trust the law, said Vance has judges and sheriffs in his pocket. Maybe, but right now a town with witnesses is safer than out here alone. Cole gathered his things, checked his ammunition. Can you ride a little longer? Both of you, Ethan nodded, though his face showed the exhaustion he was fighting. Then let's go. They rode through the afternoon into evening, keeping to rough country where tracks would be harder to follow. Cole set a pace the tired gelding could maintain, stopping every hour to let the horse rest and to check on Annie. The girl drifted in and out of fevered sleep, occasionally crying out for her mother, once asking if her father was coming back. Each time Ethan would stroke her hair and whisper reassurances, Cole suspected neither of them believed. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like the world was on fire, Ethan spoke. What Dobbs said, about Pa witnessing something, about land deals. The boy's voice was tight with some emotion he was trying to control. Pa was an honest man. He wouldn't have done anything wrong. I believe you. Then why did Ma leave? Why did he give up? Cole thought about his own ranch, about watching it die inch by inch while drought turned everything to dust. About the moment when you realize that all your effort, all your determination, and all your belief that hard work would be enough, it still wasn't going to save you. About how that knowledge could break a man. Sometimes the world gets too heavy, Cole said quietly, and even strong men can't carry it forever. Your pa sounds like he got caught between bad choices. Vance probably threatened your family. Your ma left to protect herself, maybe. Your pa thought leaving you where someone might find you was better than what Vance would do if he kept you close. He should have fought. Maybe, but fighting's easy when you're young and got nothing to lose. Gets harder when you got kids depending on you and you're watching them go hungry. Cole paused. I'm not saying he made the right choice, but I understand how a man gets to the place where he makes it. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then in a voice so small, Cole almost missed it. Do you think they're dead, Ma and Pa? I don't know, son. I honestly don't know. The lights of Clearwater appeared on the horizon as true darkness fell. The town was bigger than Cole expected, maybe 200 souls with a proper main street and buildings that looked permanent rather than temporary. Lamplight glowed in windows and he could hear music drifting from what was probably a saloon. Civilization, safety, help, or a trap if Dobbs had been telling the truth about Vance's reach. Cole guided the gelding toward the building marked with a weathered sign that read Sheriff. He dismounted slowly, his legs stiff from hours in the saddle, and helped the children down. Annie could barely stand, leaning heavily against her brother. Ethan looked about ready to collapse himself, but kept his arm around his sister with grim determination. Stay close, Cole said. He tied his horse to the rail and pushed open the sheriff's office door. The man behind the desk looked up from paperwork, and Cole found himself being assessed by sharp eyes and a weathered face. Mid-40s, Cole guessed. Gray at the temples, the lean build of someone who'd spent time in the saddle. A Confederate infantry pin on his vest, worn and tarnished. A veteran, then. That might be good or bad, depending on the man. Help you. The sheriff's voice was neutral, professional. Name's Cole Brennan. Found these children about 15 miles south, abandoned by a fence post. They've been out there 5 days, and the girl's sick with fever. Cole kept his voice steady, factual. They're also being hunted by men working for Clayton Vance. The sheriff's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or concern. He stood, moved around the desk to get a better look at the children. His gaze lingered on Annie's flushed face, Ethan's protective stance. Name's Samuel Henderson, he said. Been sheriff here 8 years. He raised his voice, calling toward a door at the back of the office. Ruth needs you out here. A woman appeared somewhere in her 40s with kind eyes and capable hands. She took one look at Annie and immediately moved forward. Poor baby, she murmured. Let me see her. Ethan hesitated, then let Ruth Henderson gather Annie into her arms. The girl's head lolled against the woman's shoulder, too weak to protest. Samuel Henderson's attention turned back to Cole. You said Clayton Vance's men are after these kids. That's a serious accusation. It's what they told me. Man named Frank Dobbs had 2 others with him, said the children are collateral for a debt their father owes. Cole met the sheriff's gaze steadily. Also said something about the father witnessing land deals that wouldn't look good in daylight. Said the kids are insurance to keep him quiet. Henderson's jaw tightened. The father got a name, William Walker, rancher outside Laramie, according to the boy. I know Walker. Good man. Or was before. The sheriff trailed off, shook his head. You got any proof of what you're claiming? Just what Dobbs said during our conversation, and the fact that these children were left to die in the sun while armed men tracked them. This conversation with Dobbs, you have it in town or out in the territory. Old line shack about 2 miles south of where I found the kids. Henderson studied Cole for a long moment. You're new to Clearwater, just passing through, was heading to Montana when I found them. Could have kept heading to Montana. Could have. Why didn't you? It was the same question Ethan had asked. Cole gave the same answer. Leaving them wasn't something I could live with. Something in Henderson's expression shifted some decision made. He nodded slowly. Ruth is going to take the children to our house, get them cleaned up and fed. The girl needs a doctor, which we'll arrange. You and I are going to have a longer conversation about Clayton Vance and what exactly you've gotten yourself into. Cole felt the weight of the day settle onto his shoulders. I've got $17 and a tired horse. I need work. Might have something for you. Widow named Grace Mitchell runs a spread about 5 miles out. Husband died last year. She's been struggling to keep up with it alone. Been looking for help. Why tell me this? Henderson glanced at where Ruth was carrying Annie toward the back door, Ethan following with visible reluctance. Because those kids trust you. And because if half of what you're saying about Vance is true, you're going to need a place to stay that isn't in town where everyone can see you. The sheriff's expression was grim. Vance has long arms in these parts, but he doesn't own everyone yet. Yet, man's been buying up land for years, forcing sales when he can, making unfortunate accidents happen when he can't. I've suspected for a long time, but suspicion isn't proof. Henderson paused. You might have just given me the first real evidence I've had, but it also means you've made yourself a target. Cole thought about Dobbs' parting words. You're a dead man cowboy. Wouldn't be the first time someone wanted me dead. Maybe not, but Vance plays for keeps and he's got resources you don't. Henderson moved to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each, pushed one across his desk to Cole. Drink. Then we talk about how to keep you and those kids alive long enough to figure out what to do next. Cole took the glass, drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a good burn, warming him from the inside. Through the window, he could see the stars coming out bright and clear in the vast Wyoming sky. Somewhere out there, Dobbs and his men were planning their next move. Somewhere, Clayton Vance was pulling strings that reached farther than Cole could probably imagine. And somewhere, 2 children who'd been abandoned to die were finally safe, at least for tonight. Cole had stopped running toward Montana and started running towards something else entirely. He just wasn't sure yet what it was, but tomorrow he'd find out. The first light of dawn was painting the eastern sky when Cole walked out to check on his horse. The gelding stood in the small corral behind the Henderson house, head down, finally resting after 3 hard days of riding. Cole ran his hand along the animal's neck, feeling the warmth of living muscle, the steady pulse of life, continuing despite exhaustion. Samuel Henderson found him there, 2 cups of coffee steaming in the cool morning air. Thought you might need this, the sheriff said, handing one to Cole. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher, turning the world from gray to gold. The children slept, Henderson said finally. Ruth got some willow bark tea into the girl, brought the fever down. Doctor's coming by this morning to check on her proper, but Ruth thinks she'll pull through. Cole felt tension he hadn't known he was carrying ease slightly. And the boy, Ethan, ate like he hadn't seen food in a week, which he probably hadn't, then fell asleep at the table. We carried him to bed. Henderson took a slow sip of coffee. He talked to you much about what happened. Some, enough to know his father got caught in something bigger than a simple debt. William Walker. Henderson shook his head. Good man. Honest rancher, worked hard, treated people fair. Then the drought hit and Vance's men came around offering help that turned into chains. You know this for certain. I know Walker's not the first rancher to lose everything after refusing to sell to Vance. I know there have been 3 suspicious fires, 2 fatal horse accidents, and 1 drowning in the past 2 years, all men who stood in Vance's way. Henderson's voice was flat angry. I know it, but knowing and proving are different things. Dobbs admitted the children are insurance, said Walker witnessed land deals that wouldn't look good. which means Walker's still alive, probably hiding somewhere terrified for his kids. Henderson turned to look at Cole directly. You understand what you've walked into. This isn't just helping two lost children. This is standing against the most powerful man in the territory. Cole thought about Dobbs' promise. We'll be waiting. Thought about $17 in his pocket and a life that had already fallen apart once. Seems to me powerful men get that way because folks are too scared to stand against them. True enough. Question is, are you willing to be the one who stands? Cole looked toward the house where two children slept safe for the first time in days. Thought about Ethan's old eyes and Annie's fevered trust. Thought about the fence post and the choice he'd made there. Already made my stand when I stopped on that road. Henderson nodded slowly, something like approval in his expression. Then let's talk about Grace Mitchell and whether she'll hire a cowboy who's about to make himself the most unpopular man in Wyoming territory. Grace Mitchell's ranch sat in a valley where a creek still ran clear, despite the drought-watering grassland that actually looked green instead of the dead brown Cole had grown accustomed to. The house was solid timber construction, well-maintained with a barn and corrals that spoke of money once spent carefully and work done right. A woman stood in the largest corral working a young horse on a lead line, her movements practiced and patient. She looked up as Cole and Henderson rode in, her expression wary, until she recognized the sheriff. Samuel, she called, leading the horse to the fence. Wasn't expecting you. Got someone I think you should meet. Henderson dismounted, gestured to Cole. This is Cole Brennan. He's looking for work, and I thought he might be a good fit for your situation. Grace Mitchell was tall, maybe 5'8", with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, and eyes that assessed Cole with the measuring gaze of someone who had hired hands before and knew what to look for. She wore men's work pants and a simple shirt, both well-worn but clean. Her hands, Cole noticed, showed the same calluses his own did. You got ranch experience. Direct, no wasted words. 7 years running my own spread outside Laramie, lost it to the drought. What happened? Wells went dry. Grass died. Cattle died faster than I could bury them. Bank took what was left. Cole kept his voice level, factual. No point in dressing up failure with excuses. Something shifted in her expression, understanding maybe. I'm sorry, that's hard. It was, but it's done now. She turned to Henderson. Why bring him to me, Samuel? You know I've been managing fine. Have you? Henderson's tone was gentle but pointed. Ruth told me about the cut fences last week. The 20 head that went missing month before. The barn door that somehow caught fire and had to be put out before it spread. Grace's jaw tightened. Accidents happen. Not this many. Not to someone who works as careful as you do. Henderson paused. Vance has been sending his men around, hasn't he? Making offers. I'm not selling. Her voice was steel. Didn't think you would. But you need help. Real help. Someone who can do more than just work cattle. Grace looked at Cole again, this time with different eyes. You know how to use that rifle you're carrying? Well enough. Well enough to stand against men who don't play fair. Cole thought about Dobbs and his companions, about the casual way they'd talked about children as collateral. I've already crossed them once. Figured I might as well make a habit of it. Henderson explained then the whole story. Finding the children, Dobbs' admission, the connection to Vance. Grace listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. When Henderson finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the house. Come on, both of you. Inside the house was neat and spare, furnished with pieces that looked handmade but quality. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall. Above it hung a rifle, and beside that, a framed photograph of a man in his 30s, smiling at something outside the camera's view. My husband James, Grace said, following Cole's gaze, died a year ago last month. Horse threw him, broke his neck. She paused. That's the official story anyway. You don't believe it? Cole asked. James was the best horseman in the territory. Broke horses for other ranches, never had a serious accident in 15 years. She moved to a cabinet, pulled out a ledger. 3 days before he died, Clayton Vance's lawyer came by with papers. Wanted to buy this ranch for a third of what it's worth. James told them, no, showed them the door. She opened the ledger, turned it so Cole could see. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, dates and amounts and notes. James kept records. Every time Vance's men came by, every threat, every offer, every accident that happened to neighbors who refused to sell. He was building a case, gathering evidence. Did he go to the law? Henderson asked. Was planning to. Had an appointment with the territorial marshal the week after he died. Grace's voice was controlled, but Cole could hear the rage beneath. Then his horse threw him in a way no horse he'd trained would ever throw him, and he broke his neck in a way that seemed awfully convenient for Clayton Vance. Henderson leaned forward. Grace, why didn't you bring this to me? What could you do? It's just notes in a book, suspicions of a widow who might be looking for someone to blame. She closed the ledger carefully. And I was scared. Still am if I'm honest. But I'm also tired of being scared. She looked at Cole. Samuel's right. I need help. Not just someone to work cattle, but someone who will stand with me when Vance makes his next move. Because he will make a move. He wants this land, and he's not the type to give up. What's this land worth to him? Cole asked. Railroads coming through, Southern Pacific surveying routes for a northern extension. This valley, it's the easiest pass through the mountains for 50 miles. Whoever owns this land when the railroad comes through will be able to name their price. Grace's smile was bitter. James figured it out 6 months before he died. That's when Vance's offers started. The math was simple. Vance had been buying up land along the route, forcing sales, making problems disappear. Grace's ranch was probably the last piece he needed to control the entire corridor, which made her the last obstacle between him and a fortune. How many hands you got working here now? Cole asked. Just Hank. He's 65, been with us since James and I married. Good man, but he can't do the heavy work anymore. You'll need more help if trouble comes. Can't afford more help. Barely making payroll as it is. Cole thought about the $17 in his pocket, about Montana and fresh starts, and the safety of being nobody in a place where nobody knew his name. Then he thought about 2 children sleeping at the Henderson house, and about Grace Mitchell standing alone against men who'd already killed her husband. I'll work for room and board to start, he said. You got a cabin or a bunk I can use? Grace studied him. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. No, but seems to me you and I have the same problem. Vance wants you gone, and now he probably wants me dead. We stand together, we both stand stronger. This could get you killed. Could, but hiding could get those kids killed, and I'm not letting that happen. Cole met her gaze steadily. I made them a promise. I intend to keep it. Something passed between them, then an understanding that went beyond words. 2 people who'd lost things standing at the edge of losing more, making the choice to fight instead of run. Grace extended her hand. $30 a month plus room and board. Small cabin out back. It's not much, but it's weatherproof. Work is sun up to sundown 6 days a week. I don't tolerate drinking, fighting, or slacking off. Cole shook her hand, felt the calluses that matched his own. Fair enough. One more thing. Her grip tightened slightly. Those children, they staying with the Hendersons. For now, bring them here. This ranch is harder to watch than a house in town, and if Vance's men come looking, better they find us ready than catch them alone. Cole felt something loosen in his chest. He'd been trying to figure out how to protect Ethan and Annie while working a ranch 5 miles from town. Grace had just solved that problem. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This might be the worst decision any of us make. But she smiled when she said it, and Cole saw steel beneath the worry. Henderson stood. I'll spread the word quietly. Let people know what's happening. Vance has power, but he doesn't own everyone. There are still good folks in this territory who'll stand for what's right. Careful, Samuel, Grace warned. The good folks have families to protect too. Can't ask them to risk what we're risking. Not asking, just informing. Henderson headed for the door, then paused. Cole, you're making enemies today. Powerful enemies. You sure about this? Cole thought about Dobbs' words. Those kids aren't just collateral, they're insurance. Thought about a system so corrupt that children could be used as leverage to hide murder and theft. I'm sure. After Henderson left, Grace showed Cole the cabin. It was small, one room with a narrow bed, a table, and a chair. But the roof didn't leak, the door closed tight, and there was a window that looked east toward the sunrise. It's perfect, Cole said. Liar. But Grace smiled. Hank will be back from checking the north fence in an hour or so. I'll introduce you, get you started on the work. For now, settle in." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Cole, those kids, what are their names?" "Ethan and Annie Walker." "They got any family besides the father?" "Mother left 2 months ago. Don't know where she is, or if she's alive." Grace nodded slowly. "Then they're lucky you found them. Not many men would have stopped." After she left, Cole sat on the bed and looked around his new home. It wasn't much. It wasn't Montana. It wasn't a fresh start or an escape or any of the things he'd been riding toward 3 days ago. But it was something, a place to stand, a cause to fight for, people who needed him. Maybe that was enough. The first month passed in a rhythm of hard work and growing tension. Cole rose before dawn, worked until full dark, learning the land and the cattle and the 100 small details that made Grace's ranch run. Hank turned out to be a grizzled veteran of range wars and cattle drives, suspicious at first, but gradually warming as Cole proved he knew his business. The children came to the ranch after 3 days. Ruth Henderson drove them out in a wagon, Ethan sitting straight-backed and wary beside her, Annie clutching her rag doll with the desperate grip of someone who'd learned that everything could be taken away. Cole helped them down from the wagon, felt Annie's small hand slip into his with absolute trust that made his throat tight. "You stayed," she whispered. "Told you I would." Ethan's eyes swept the ranch, cataloging exits and hiding places, already planning for danger. Too young to think that way, but life had taught him early. "We're safe here," the boy asked. "Safer than in town. And I'm here. Grace is here. Hank knows how to use a rifle, and he will if needed." Cole crouched down to their level. "But I need you both to listen. Stay close to the house when I'm working. If you see riders you don't know, you get inside and you stay there. Can you do that?" They both nodded, solemn as judges. Grace appeared in the doorway, wiped flour from her hands on her apron. "You must be Ethan and Annie. I'm Grace. Come on inside. I've got bread just out of the oven, and you both look like you could use feeding." Annie looked up at Cole. "Can we?" The question broke his heart a little. The idea that she needed permission to eat, to exist, to take up space in the world. "You can. This is your home now, for as long as you need it." Watching them follow Grace inside, Cole felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. These children were counting on him. Grace was counting on him. He'd made promises, and cowboys kept their promises, even when it cost them everything. The work fell into patterns. Cole would rise at first light, check the stock ride fence lines, looking for signs of tampering. Twice he found wire-cut gates left open. Once he found 3 head of cattle driven into a canyon and left to die of thirst. Messages from Vance. "We can reach you whenever we want." Grace took the losses without complaint, but Cole saw the worry in her eyes. Her reserves were thin. She couldn't afford many more incidents like this. Evenings after the work was done, Cole would sit with Ethan on the porch and teach him about cattle and horses and the things a man needed to know to survive in rough country. Not because he planned to raise the boy as a ranch hand, but because knowledge was protection, and Ethan deserved every bit of protection Cole could provide. The boy was quick, smart, and asked questions that showed he was thinking 3 steps ahead. He'd learned to rope, already had a natural seat on a horse, and more important, he had sand. The kind of courage that didn't come from not being afraid, but from being afraid and doing it anyway. Annie attached herself to Grace, following the woman around the house and garden, learning to cook and sew and manage a household. She was quieter than her brother, but occasionally Cole would hear her laugh, and it was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. They were healing, slowly in small ways, but healing. Then one evening in late August, Samuel Henderson rode out to the ranch with news that changed everything. "Town meeting tomorrow night," the sheriff said without preamble. "I'm calling it, making it official. We need to talk about Vance and what's been happening." Grace frowned. "That's dangerous, Samuel, forcing people to choose sides publicly." "They need to choose. That's exactly my point." Henderson dismounted, accepted the coffee Grace offered. "Vance has been operating in shadows, making private threats, quiet deals. He's got power because people are afraid and isolated. We bring it into the light, make people see they're not alone in this. Maybe we can organize some resistance. Or maybe we paint targets on our backs," Cole said. "That too, but I've been talking to folks quietly. Tom Peterson's ready to stand. So are Ed Wilkins and his 2 boys. Sarah Chen over at the Mercantile, she's had Vance's men pressuring her to close so they can buy the building. Even old Mrs. Cartwright, who never liked me much, she's tired of being scared. Henderson looked at Cole. Your story about finding those kids, about what Dobbs admitted, it's given people something concrete to rally around. Not just vague threats and suspicious accidents, but actual evidence of what Vance is doing. Evidence that's just my word against his. For now, but if we can get people to come forward with their own stories, if we can show a pattern, maybe we can build something the territorial marshal can't ignore. Grace was quiet for a moment. And if Vance sends his men to break up the meeting, or worse, then at least we'll know who we're really dealing with, and so will the town. Henderson drained his coffee, set the cup down with finality. I'm tired of watching good people lose everything while corrupt men get richer. If I go down fighting this, at least I go down for something that matters. Cole understood that sentiment, had felt it himself when he stopped at the fence post. When and where, he asked. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at the church. Neutral ground big enough to hold everyone, and maybe the setting will remind folks about right and wrong. Henderson smiled without humor. Plus, Vance can't burn down a church without turning even his own people against him. You sure about that? Grace asked. No, but we're running out of options. After Henderson left, Cole and Grace stood in the yard watching the sunset behind the mountains. This could go badly, Grace said quietly. Probably will. We could still run, take the kids' head for Montana or California, start over somewhere Vance's reach doesn't extend. Cole had thought about it. Late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd thought about loading Ethan and Annie onto horses and just riding away from all of this. Would you run? He asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment. No, James built this place, died for this place. I won't let Vance take it. Then I won't run either. She looked at him in the fading light. Why, Cole, this isn't your fight. You could walk away, take those kids, start that new life you were heading toward. Why stand here with me against something that'll probably kill us both? He thought about how to answer that, thought about duty and promises and the code he'd lived by since he was 14 years old and alone in the world. Because a cowboy doesn't leave people in trouble, he said finally. And because I made those kids a promise. Can't keep that promise if I'm running scared. Even if keeping it kills you. Even then, dead or alive, I keep my promises. Grace nodded slowly. Then I guess we're both fools. Probably. But at least we're fools together. The church was packed when they arrived the next evening. Seemed like half the town had turned out along with ranchers and homesteaders from the surrounding territory. The air was thick with tension and the smell of too many people in too small a space. Cole had left Ethan and Annie at the ranch with Hank, who'd promised to keep them safe and shoot anyone who came around causing trouble. The old cowboy had meant it too, his ancient Navy Colt loaded and ready. Grace stayed close to Cole as they found seats near the front. Tom Peterson nodded at them from across the aisle, a big man in his 50s with hands like hams and a reputation for fairness. Beside him sat his 3 sons, all grown and all looking grim. Samuel Henderson stood at the front of the church waiting for the crowd to settle. When he finally spoke, his voice carried to every corner. Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't easy, speaking out against powerful men, but it's necessary. He paused, let the words sink in. Clayton Vance has been operating in this territory for 5 years now. In that time, we've seen suspicious fires, fatal accidents, forced sales of property below market value. We've watched good people lose everything while Vance's empire grows. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the door, as if worried who might be listening. I called this meeting because I believe we've reached a point where we have to choose. Do we keep accepting this as the cost of doing business? Or do we stand together and say enough? That's mighty fine talk, Sheriff. The voice came from the back of the church. A man stood well-dressed in a way that marked him as someone with money. Cole recognized the type, lawyer or land agent, someone who made a living from paperwork and other people's misery. But Clayton Vance is a legitimate businessman. These accusations you're making, they're serious. You got any proof? I've got testimony from a witness who heard Vance's enforcer admit to using children as leverage to silence their father. The well-dressed man smirked. Hearsay from some drifter. That's your proof. Cole felt Grace tense beside him. Before he could decide whether to speak up, Tom Peterson stood. I've got proof, the big rancher said, his voice carrying like thunder. Last spring, Vance's men came by my place. Said I should sell, take their offer. I said no. 2 days later, my barn burned down with 20 head of horses inside. Horses I'd spent 10 years breeding. Another man stood, someone Cole didn't recognize. My well got poisoned. Lost half my stock before I figured out someone had dumped something down it. Week before I'd refused to sell to Vance. More people stood. One by one, stories poured out. Threats, accidents, losses too convenient to be coincidence. The well-dressed man tried to interrupt, tried to shout them down, but the voices kept coming. Then a woman stood, older, maybe 70, with white hair pulled back severe and eyes that had seen too much. Eleanor Johnson, she said, and the crowd quieted. Mrs. Johnson had a reputation as a difficult woman, judgmental and quick to criticize. But she also had a reputation for honesty. I don't much like admitting I was wrong, but I was wrong about Clayton Vance. She looked around the church, met eyes that looked away. 6 months ago, Vance's lawyer came to me. Wanted to buy my house in town. I said no. He said I'd regret it. Her voice was steady, but Cole could hear the anger beneath. 2 weeks later, my grandniece Alice was walking home from school. Man grabbed her, tried to force her into a wagon. If Tom Peterson's boy hadn't been nearby and run the man off, Lord knows what would have happened. A collective gasp ran through the crowd. I went to the sheriff, described the man. Samuel recognized him as one of Vance's employees. Mrs. Johnson's hands were shaking now. Nothing could be proved. The man denied it, had witnesses who said he was somewhere else. But Alice described a scar on his hand, distinctive mark. 2 days later, I sold my house to Vance for half what it was worth, because I was scared for my family. The church was dead silent now. So you want proof? Miss Johnson looked at the well-dressed man. There's your proof. Clayton Vance uses fear and violence to take what he wants, and we've all been too scared to stand against him. The well-dressed man sat down, his smirk gone. Henderson let the silence stretch. Then he said, I've been gathering evidence, building a case, but I need help. I need people willing to testify officially, to give statements that can be presented to the territorial marshal. Vance will kill anyone who testifies, someone called out. Maybe. Or maybe if enough of us stand together, he'll realize he can't kill us all without consequences. Henderson's gaze swept the room. I won't lie to you, this is dangerous. But doing nothing is dangerous too. How many more barns have to burn? How many more children have to be threatened? Tom Peterson stood again. I'll testify. Put my name first on that list, Samuel. Let Vance come after me if he's got the sand for it. One by one, others stood. Not everyone. Some sat with eyes downcast, too afraid or too compromised. But enough. Enough to matter. Grace stood. I'll testify about my husband's death, about the diary he kept with records of Vance's threats. Cole watched it happen, this community finding its spine. It wasn't everyone, but it was a start. Then the church doors opened and Frank Dobbs walked in. He wasn't alone. 4 men flanked him, all armed, all with the hard look of professional guns. The crowd shifted, people pressing back, trying to make themselves small. Dobbs smiled his predator smile. That's a lot of brave talk I'm hearing. A lot of accusations against Mr. Vance. He walked down the aisle slowly, letting everyone see him, see his guns. Mr. Vance asked me to attend this meeting. Make sure folks understood the consequences of spreading lies. Samuel Henderson's hand moved toward his gun. You're not welcome here, Dobbs. Public meeting, Sheriff. I got as much right to be here as anyone. Dobbs stopped, looked around at the faces, trying not to meet his gaze. See, the thing about consequences is they're real. Tom Peterson, you remember what happened to your horses. That could happen again. Could happen worse. He turned, looked directly at Mrs. Johnson. And you, ma'am, that was unfortunate business with your grandniece. Terrible things, strangers grabbing children. World's a dangerous place for young ones. The threat was naked, undisguised. Cole stood. He didn't plan it, didn't think about it. Just found himself on his feet, moving into the aisle between Dobbs and the crowd. That's enough, Cole said quietly. Dobbs turned his smile on Cole. The cowboy, heard you were still around. Thought you'd have ridden on by now, seeing as how dangerous things have gotten. Thought wrong. Brave of you, stupid but brave. Dobbs gestured to his men. See, Mr. Vance sent me here to deliver a message. To you specific, about those kids you're keeping. Cole felt ice form in his chest. You leave them alone. Oh, I'll leave them alone, for now. But their daddy, William Walker. He filed papers with the territorial court. Custody petition. Says he wants his kids back. Dobbs pulled a folded document from his coat, held it up. Legal as can be, hearings in 2 weeks. The words hit Cole like a physical blow. Custody hearing, legal proceedings, the one thing he couldn't fight with fists or guns. Walker abandoned those children, Samuel said. Left them to die. That's one story. Walker's story's different. Says he left them with a family friend, got delayed getting back to pick them up. Says this cowboy kidnapped them, been keeping them against their will. Dobbs' smile widened. Course, truth doesn't matter much in court. What matters is what you can prove. And Mr. Vance has lawyers who are real good at proving things. Henderson stepped forward. This is harassment, Dobbs. Trying to use the law to intimidate. This is justice, Sheriff. Man wants his kids back. That's his right. Dobbs looked at Cole. You want to fight it, you hire a lawyer, you go to court. But between now and then, those kids stay where they are. And accidents do happen to folks who get in Mr. Vance's way. He started walking back toward the door. His men followed, all of them watching the crowd with contempt. At the door, Dobbs paused. Oh, in this meeting? This organizing against Mr. Vance, he's aware. He's watching. And he remembers everyone who speaks against him. He let that sink in. Think about that before you make choices you can't take back. Then they were gone, and the church erupted in frightened voices. Cole stood frozen, his mind racing. Custody hearing. William Walker coming back. Vance using the law as a weapon. Grace's hand on his arm brought him back. Cole, we'll fight this. How he's right. I've got no legal claim to those kids. William Walker is their father, and I'm just some cowboy who picked them up off the road. He abandoned them. Any judge will see that. Any honest judge. But Dobbs said Vance has lawyers. What if he has judges too? The crowd was breaking up now, people hurrying for the doors, scared and angry in equal measure. The moment of unity was fracturing already. Tom Peterson approached, his face grave. Cole will stand with you, whatever you need for this court fight. Appreciate it, but standing with me might get you killed. Might, but some things are worth dying for. Peterson clapped him on the shoulder. Those kids deserve better than what life's given them. They deserve you. After everyone left, Cole sat in a pew with his head in his hands. Grace sat beside him, quiet and patient. I don't know how to fight this, Cole said finally. Everything else I know how to handle. Men with guns I can face. Hard work I can do, but courts and lawyers and legal procedures, that's not my world. Then we learn. We get help. Grace paused. Samuel mentioned a lawyer in Cheyenne. Man named Porter, used to be a prosecutor, knows how the system works. Maybe he can help. Lawyers cost money I don't have. Then we'll find money. I'll put up the ranch as collateral if I have to. Cole looked at her. You'd risk that for kids you barely know. I'd risk it for what's right, and for a man who's risking everything to do what's right. She met his gaze steadily. You're not alone in this, Cole. I need you to understand that. We're in this together. The words settled something in him, eased some of the panic. He wasn't alone. For the first time in years, since before his parents died, since before the ranch failed, he wasn't facing the world alone. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. No, but we're going to try. That has to count for something. The next morning, Samuel Henderson rode out with news that made everything worse. William Walker's in town, the sheriff said without preamble. Arrived last night with Vance's lawyer. They're staying at the hotel preparing for the custody hearing. Cole felt his stomach drop. He's really going through with it. Looks like, but Cole, something's off. I saw Walker briefly tried to talk to him. He wouldn't meet my eyes, looked scared out of his mind. Henderson dismounted, accepted coffee from Grace. This doesn't feel like a man fighting for his kids. This feels like a man being forced to do something he doesn't want to do. Vance is making him do it. That's my guess. Probably threatened him same way he threatens everyone else. Henderson drank his coffee thinking. Question is, can we prove it? And if we can, will Walker testify to it? If he's that scared, he won't testify against Vance. Maybe not willingly, but maybe if we can offer him protection a way out, he might find some courage. Cole thought about it. Can I talk to him before the hearing? Henderson considered. I can arrange it, but it has to be official at my office with witnesses. Can't have Vance claiming intimidation or coercion. Fair enough. Set it up. That afternoon, Cole rode into town with his heart pounding like a war drum. He was going to meet the man who'd abandoned Ethan and Annie, the man who'd left two children to die rather than stand against Clayton Vance. Part of him wanted to hate William Walker. But another part, the part that had lost everything to drought and understood how desperation could break a man, that part felt something like pity. Walker was waiting in Henderson's office, and Cole's first thought was how small he looked. Maybe 5'8", thin to the point of gaunt, with eyes that wouldn't stay still and hands that shook when he tried to light a cigarette. This was the man Ethan and Annie had called Pa. Hard to see the connection between this broken creature and those brave children. Mr. Walker, Cole said, removing his hat. I'm Cole Brennan. Walker's eyes finally met his, and Cole saw shame there, deep and corrosive. You're the one who found my kids. I am. They're alive. Both of them. Annie was sick when I left them. I thought maybe. They're alive. Annie's fever broke. They're both safe. Walker's shoulders sagged with relief so profound it was almost physical. Thank God. Thank God. Why did you do it? The question came out harsher than Cole intended. Why leave them by that fence? Walker's hands shook harder. I didn't want to. You have to believe me, I never wanted to. Then why? Because Vance said if I didn't, he'd kill them. Not quick, not clean. He described exactly how he'd do it, what he'd do to Annie before he killed her. Walker's voice broke. I couldn't protect them. Couldn't fight him, so I thought if I left them somewhere, someone might find them, gave them a chance. At least that was better than watching Vance's men take them. Cole felt his anger drain away, replaced by cold certainty. And now he's making you file for custody, using the law to get them back so he has leverage over you again. He wants me to testify at the hearing. Say you kidnapped them, corrupted them, that they're not safe with you. Walker's hands clenched into fists. I don't want to. They're better off with you than they ever were with me. But if I don't do what Vance says, he'll kill them anyway. At least this way, they have a chance. What if you testified against Vance instead, told the truth about what he's done? I'd be dead within a day. What if we could protect you, get you away somewhere Vance can't reach? Walker laughed a bitter sound. There's nowhere he can't reach. The man owns judges, marshals, politicians. He's got men in every town between here and Denver. I testify against him. I'm signing my own death warrant. Samuel Henderson, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. William, you're signing it anyway. You think Vance is going to let you live after this? You're a loose end. Soon as he's done using you, he'll tie you off permanent. Maybe, but at least my kids will be alive somewhere. With you, maybe if the court rules that way. With someone who'll protect them better than I did. Cole leaned forward. Listen to me. I made a promise to your children. I told them they'd be safe, that I wouldn't leave them. I intend to keep that promise. But the way to keep them safe isn't to let Vance win. It's to fight him. Expose what he's done. Put him in a place where he can't hurt anyone anymore. You can't fight Clayton Vance. He's too powerful. Alone, maybe, but not if we have evidence. Not if we have witnesses. Cole paused. Your kids are brave, William. Ethan stood up to Dobbs with a gun in his shaking hands to protect his sister. Annie kept going when most grown men would have given up. They got that courage from somewhere. Maybe from you before you let fear break you. Walker's eyes filled with tears. I'm not brave. I'm a coward who left his children to die. You made a terrible choice, but you can make a better one now. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. Testify. Tell the truth. Give your kids something to remember besides cowardice. For a long moment, Walker said nothing. Then so quietly, Cole almost missed it. If I do this, will you take care of them? When Vance kills me, will you be their father? I already am. Walker nodded slowly. Then I'll do it. God help me, I'll testify. The 2 weeks before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation. Samuel Henderson brought in William Porter, the lawyer from Cheyenne, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who'd prosecuted corruption cases in Denver before moving to private practice. Porter listened to their evidence read. Grace's husband's diary, interviewed witnesses, and built a case, not just for custody, but against Clayton Vance himself. This is bigger than 2 children, Porter said during one of their planning sessions. This is about exposing systemic corruption. If we do this right, we bring down Vance's whole operation. And if we don't do it right, Grace asked, then we probably all end up dead or ruined. Porter smiled without humor. But I've never backed down from a fight I believed in, and I believe in this one. They gathered witnesses. Tom Peterson agreed to testify about his burned barn. Mrs. Johnson about the threat to her grandniece. Others came forward emboldened by the community meeting, ready to tell their stories. Grace practiced her testimony, describing James's diary, the threats he documented, the circumstances of his death. Her voice stayed steady, but Cole saw how her hands shook when she talked about her husband. And William Walker stayed in protective custody at Henderson's jail, guarded around the clock, preparing to commit what Vance would certainly consider betrayal worthy of death. The children knew something was happening. Ethan especially, always watching, always thinking ahead. The hearing is about us, isn't it? The boy asked one evening, as Cole was teaching him to properly coil a rope. No point in lying. Yes. Our pa wants us back. That's what he's saying, but it's complicated. Ethan's hands stilled on the rope. Do you want us? The question pierced Cole's heart. More than anything. Then why can't we just stay? You're taking care of us. We're happy here. Because there are laws about these things. Your father has legal rights, even though he left you. The court has to decide what's best. We could run, all of us, go somewhere far away. Cole crouched down, put his hands on Ethan's shoulders. I'm not running. Not from this, not from anything. I made you a promise, and I'm keeping it. Whatever the court decides, I'll find a way to keep you safe. What if the court says we have to go back to Pa? Then I'll appeal. I'll fight. I'll do whatever it takes. Cole's voice was fierce. You're mine now, Ethan. You and Annie both. That doesn't change no matter what some judge says. Ethan's eyes searched his face, looking for lies, for false comfort. Whatever he saw there satisfied him, because he nodded and went back to coiling his rope. But that night, Cole heard him crying in his room, and it took everything he had not to put the children on horses and ride away into the dark. The morning of the hearing, Cole put on his cleanest shirt, his least worn hat. Grace wore a simple dress, dark and respectful. They looked like respectable people, which was the point. The courthouse in Clearwater was a 2-story brick building that doubled as the town hall and land office. The courtroom on the second floor was packed with spectators, everyone wanting to see how this would play out. Judge Amos Patterson presided, a man in his 60s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen every variety of human failure. He had a reputation for fairness, which was good. He also had a reputation for following the letter of the law, which could be bad depending on how things went. Clayton Vance sat in the front row with his lawyers, 3 of them all in expensive suits. The man himself was in his 50s, handsome in a cold way with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd never questioned his own authority. This was the man who'd killed Grace's husband, who'd threatened children, who'd built an empire on fear and violence. He looked like a prosperous businessman who wouldn't hurt a fly. Frank Dobbs sat behind Vance along with several other hard-faced men. Insurance, Cole realized. A show of force. William Walker sat on the other side of the courtroom, guarded by Samuel Henderson, and looking like a man heading for his own execution. The judge called the court to order. We're here to determine custody of minor children, Ethan Walker and Annie Walker. Judge Patterson said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the murmuring crowd. William Walker has petitioned to regain custody of his children from their current guardian, Cole Brennan. We will hear arguments from both sides. Vance's lead lawyer stood, a smooth man in his 40s, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Your Honor, this is a simple matter. William Walker is the biological father of these children. Due to temporary financial hardship during the drought, he made arrangements for their care while he sought employment. Mr. Brennan, acting without legal authority, took possession of the children and has refused to return them. We ask that custody be immediately restored to their rightful father. Porter stood. Your Honor, the facts tell a different story. William Walker abandoned these children in the wilderness with no food, inadequate water, and no supervision. They were left for 5 days before Mr. Brennan found them. The girl was suffering from fever caused by consuming poisonous berries. This was not a temporary arrangement. This was abandonment, and under territorial law, abandoned children may be placed with guardians who can provide proper care. The judge made a note. We'll hear testimony. Bailiff called the first witness. Vance's lawyer called character witnesses for William Walker. People who'd known him before the drought, who testified he'd been a good father, a hard worker, an honest man. It was all true, Cole realized. Walker had been those things before fear broke him. Then they called Walker himself. The man took the stand looking like he might vomit. His hands shook, his voice was barely audible. Mr. Walker, Vance's lawyer said gently, tell us what happened during the drought. Lost everything, wells went dry, cattle died, wife left. I was desperate. Walker's voice gained a little strength. I borrowed money trying to save the ranch. From whom? Clayton Vance. He offered to help. And when you couldn't repay the loan, this was it. The moment when Walker could tell the truth or repeat Vance's script. Walker looked at Vance, then at Cole, then at the door where Ethan and Annie waited with Ruth Henderson, not allowed in the courtroom, but close enough that their presence could be felt. He said I had to sell the ranch for less than it was worth, Walker said slowly. I said no. Then his men started coming around. Threats at first, then more than threats. Vance's lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, this is not relevant to the custody matter. I think it is, Judge Patterson said. Continue, Mr. Walker. Walker's voice got stronger. They said if I didn't sell, there would be accidents. My wife got scared, left. I tried to hold on, but they kept coming. Then Dobbs, he said, if I didn't disappear, if I didn't get out of the way, they'd take my kids, kill them slow, make me watch. The courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel came down hard. Order, I will have order. And when the noise died, Walker was crying, but he kept talking. I couldn't protect them, couldn't fight Vance and his men, so I left them by that fence hoping someone good would find them, praying they'd have a chance. He looked at the judge. I don't want them back. I'm not fit to be their father. I just want them alive. And if testifying here gets me killed, at least I'll die knowing I finally did one brave thing. Vance's lawyer was objecting loudly, but Porter was on his feet. Your Honor, I call Frank Dobbs to the stand. Dobbs stood in the gallery, his face flushed with anger. I don't have to testify. I'm not part of this. You are now, the judge said. Bailiff, swear him in. Dobbs took the stand, radiating menace. Porter approached him carefully like approaching a dangerous animal. Mr. Dobbs, you work for Clayton Vance, correct? I do various jobs. What kind of jobs? Security, debt collection, whatever's needed. Did you threaten William Walker? I collected a legitimate debt. By threatening his children, I never threatened anyone. Porter smiled. Interesting, because Cole Brennan testified earlier that you admitted children were being used as leverage. Were you lying to him, or are you lying now? Dobbs' eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me refresh your memory. You told Mr. Brennan, and I quote, these kids aren't just collateral, they're insurance. William Walker witnessed something he shouldn't have. Land deals, property transfers, things that wouldn't look good if they came to light. Long as we got his kids, he keeps his mouth shut. Did you say that? No. So Mr. Brennan is lying. He must be. Porter turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to call my next witness, Grace Mitchell. Grace took the stand with her head high and her voice steady. She described her husband's diary, the threats he'd documented, his plans to go to the territorial marshal. And what happened to your husband, Mrs. Mitchell? He died, thrown from a horse, they said. But James was the best horseman I've ever known. And 3 days before he died, Clayton Vance's men had threatened him. Porter produced the diary, entered it as evidence. The judge read several pages, his expression growing darker. Then Porter dropped the bomb. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. A letter written by James Mitchell to the territorial marshal, dated 2 days before his death. It was never sent because he died before he could mail it. But his wife found it among his effects. He handed the letter to the judge. Cole watched Patterson read it, watched his face go from stern to outraged. This letter, the judge said slowly, describes in detail a scheme by Clayton Vance to force land sales through intimidation and violence. It names specific incidents, specific amounts, specific threats. It also states that if anything happens to James Mitchell, it should be investigated as murder, not accident. The courtroom exploded. Vance was on his feet, his lawyer shouting objections. Dobbs moved toward the door, but Henderson blocked his way. Judge Patterson's gavel came down like thunder. When silence finally returned, his voice was ice. Clayton Vance, you are hereby ordered to remain in this jurisdiction, pending investigation into the allegations contained in this letter and the testimony we've heard today. Frank Dobbs, you as well. He looked at his bailiff. Take them into custody. Dobbs went for his gun, but Henderson was faster, rifle aimed and ready. Two deputies moved in, and after a tense moment, Dobbs surrendered. Vance was pale with fury, but he went quietly, already calculating his next move. The judge looked at William Walker, still on the stand, still crying. Mr. Walker, you abandoned your children under duress. The law recognizes coercion as a mitigating factor. However, you still place them in mortal danger. He paused. I'm going to ask them what they want. Bring in Ethan and Annie Walker. The children entered, Ethan holding Annie's hand. They looked so small in the big courtroom, so vulnerable. Judge Patterson's voice gentled. Ethan, Annie, I need to ask you something important. Do you understand what's happening here? Ethan nodded. Annie just stared. Your father wants to be your father again. Mr. Brennan wants to keep taking care of you. I need to know what you want. Ethan spoke clearly. We want to stay with Cole. He's our father now, our real father, the one who stayed. And why do you say that? Because he makes promises he keeps. He doesn't leave when things get hard. He makes us feel like we're worth staying for. Ethan's voice was fierce. Our pa left us. Cole saved us. That makes him our father. Annie nodded agreement, then added in her small voice, Cole tells me bedtime stories. He braids my hair even though he's not very good at it. He promised forever. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he made his ruling. William Walker, your parental rights are hereby terminated due to abandonment under duress. Cole Brennan, you are granted permanent legal custody of Ethan Walker and Annie Walker with all rights and responsibilities thereof. He paused. Mr. Walker, I see your remorse. I see you tried to protect your children the only way you knew how. That counts for something. You may maintain contact through letters if the children and Mr. Brennan agree, but custody is decided. Cole felt Annie crash into him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Ethan stood straighter, something like relief flooding his face. They were his, legally, officially, permanently his. Grace was crying. Porter was shaking his hand. Samuel Henderson was grinning like a fool. And William Walker sat on the witness stand looking both broken and relieved, a man who'd finally found the courage to do one right thing, even knowing it would cost him everything. Outside the courthouse, Cole knelt down and gathered both children close. You're stuck with me now, he said. Forever means forever. Good, Annie said. Ethan just held on tight, and for the first time since Cole had found him, the boy finally let himself cry. They had won. Against all odds, against power and money and corruption, they had won. But as Cole looked up and saw Vance being led away in chains, saw the fury in the man's eyes, he knew this wasn't over. They'd won the battle. But the war was just beginning. The weeks after the trial passed in a strange stillness, like the quiet after a storm when the world is rebuilding itself piece by piece. Clayton Vance sat in jail awaiting trial on charges of conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and murder. Frank Dobbs had turned evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence, and his testimony was dismantling Vance's entire operation like pulling threads from a rotten fabric. The town breathed easier. Ranchers who'd been forced to sell were filing lawsuits to reclaim their land. The territorial marshal had arrived with a team of investigators, and every day brought new revelations about the scope of Vance's crimes. But for Cole Brennan, standing on the porch of the small cabin, watching the sun rise over Grace Mitchell's ranch, the victory felt both complete and fragile. He had the children. The papers were legal and binding. Ethan and Annie were his in every way that mattered. Yet he could still see the fear in Ethan's eyes sometimes, that flicker of worry that this too would be taken away. Could still hear Annie asking in the middle of the night if he was really staying, if he promised, if forever meant forever. Trust once broken took time to rebuild. Cole turned as the cabin door opened, and Ethan emerged already dressed for the day's work. The boy was taller than he'd been 3 months ago, filling out with regular meals and hard labor. His hands showed the beginnings of calluses, and he moved with the confidence of someone learning to be at home in his own skin. "Morning," Ethan said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning, you're up early." "Couldn't sleep much. Kept thinking about Pa." The boy looked out at the mountains. "Judge said he could write us letters if we wanted. Do we want that?" Cole considered the question carefully. William Walker had testified, had found courage when it mattered most, had given his children the truth, even knowing it might cost him his life. That deserves something. "What do you think?" Cole asked. "I think he made terrible choices, but he also made one good one at the end." Ethan paused. "Maybe letters are okay. Not visits, just letters. So when I'm older and I try to understand why things happened the way they did, I'll have his words." That's wise thinking. Annie wants to write him back. She says everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. Ethan smiled slightly. "She's smarter than me sometimes." "She's smart in different ways. You both are." Cole put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "And yes, letters are fine. We'll tell him that." They stood together, watching the day begin, father and son, and everything but blood, and the silence between them was comfortable. Grace found Cole later that morning while he was checking fence line in the north pasture. She rode up on her mare, moving with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. "Got something I want to discuss with you," she said without preamble. "Business proposition." Cole wiped sweat from his forehead, waited. Grace wasn't one for small talk, which he appreciated. "I've been thinking about the future of this ranch," she continued, "about what James wanted to build, what we started together before he died. And I've realized I can't do it alone. Don't want to do it alone. You've got Hank and me now." "I do, but that's not what I mean." She dismounted, stood beside him, looking out at the land. "I want you as a full partner. Equal ownership. Mitchell Brennan Ranch." The words hit Cole like a physical thing. "Grace, I can't afford to buy into a ranch this size." "Not asking you to buy in with money. You've already bought in with sweat and blood and standing against Vance when it would have been easier to run." She turned to face him. "I'm offering this because you've earned it, because I trust you, and because those children deserve a legacy, something solid they can inherit someday." Cole thought about Ethan and Annie, about building something that would last beyond his own life, about roots deep enough to weather any storm. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "You could find someone with capital, someone who could invest cash into expanding the operation." "I don't need cash. I need integrity. Someone who will treat this land like it matters, who will make decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable." Grace's voice was steady. "James always said you judge a man by what he does when no one's watching. I've watched you with those kids, Cole. I've seen how you work. That tells me everything I need to know." "What are the terms?" 50-50 partnership. We formalize it with Porter, get legal papers drawn up. You're already managing the day-to-day operations with me. This just makes it official." She paused. "There's adjacent property coming up for sale. 500 acres with good water rights. If we buy it together, expand the operation, we could build something that'll support both our families for generations." Generations. The words settled into Cole's chest like warmth. He'd spent so long thinking his life was ending that everything worth having had already slipped through his fingers. But here was Grace offering him a future, offering his children a legacy. "I accept it," he said, "on one condition. When the time comes, Ethan and Annie inherit equal shares with any family you might have someday." Grace extended her hand. "Already planned on it. Partners. Partners." They shook on it there in the north pasture, with the sun climbing higher and the cattle grazing peaceful, and the future opening up before them like the Wyoming sky. The days took on new rhythms after that. Cole worked the ranch with a different kind of purpose, now, not just earning wages but building something permanent. He and Grace made decisions together about stock purchases and land management and long-term planning. Porter drew up partnership papers that were filed with the county recorder, making it legal and binding. But more important than the business side were the small moments of building family. Evening meals around the table in Grace's house, all of them together. Ethan helping with the books, showing a head for numbers that surprised them all. Annie learning to cook from Grace, her laughter filling the kitchen when something went wrong. And the teaching, the passing down of knowledge that mattered. One afternoon, Cole took Ethan out to break a young horse that had come in half wild from the range. The animal was 2 years old, never been handled properly, all nerves and fear. "How do we do this?" Ethan asked, watching the horse pace the round pen. "First, we teach him he's safe, that we're not going to hurt him." Cole moved slowly into the pen, letting the horse see him, smell him, get used to his presence. "You can break a horse with whip and spur, make him obey through fear, but you'll never have his trust. And a horse you can't trust will kill you someday when it matters." He worked patiently, hours passing, while the horse gradually accepted first his presence, then his touch, finally his weight. Ethan watched every move, learning not just the mechanics, but the philosophy beneath. "It's like people," the boy said suddenly. "You could make someone do what you want through fear, but you'd never really have them." "That's right, real loyalty, real respect, that only comes when someone chooses to give it." Cole paused in his work. "Your pa, he was controlled through fear. Vance broke him that way. But you and Annie, I don't want you obeying me because you're scared. I want you choosing to because you know I'll always do right by you. You will, though, do right by us." It wasn't a question. "Always, that's a promise." "I know. That's why you're our father." Ethan said it simply, the statement of fact, and Cole had to turn away so the boy wouldn't see the tears in his eyes. Later that week, Annie asked Cole to teach her to ride alone, not just being led on a gentle horse, but truly riding. Grace offered to do it, but Annie insisted it had to be Cole. They started in the small corral with an old mare that wouldn't spook at anything short of lightning. Annie climbed into the saddle, her small hands gripping the reins too tight, her whole body tense. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know, that's okay." "You said being scared is just your body telling you something matters." Cole smiled. She'd been listening when he talked to Ethan. "That's right. And you know what courage is, being brave, being scared and doing it anyway." He adjusted her grip on the reins, showed her how to sit balanced. "Yesterday you fell off. You getting back on today, that's courage. What if I fall again? Then you get back on again, and again, until falling doesn't scare you anymore because you know you can get up." He stepped back. "But I don't think you're going to fall. I think you're going to ride just fine." He was right. Annie walked the mare around the corral, then trotted, then even cantered, her face transforming from fear to concentration to pure joy. When she finally stopped, she was breathless and grinning. "I did it." "You did. I'm proud of you." "Will you teach me everything?" she asked. "Everything you know about horse and cattle and being brave?" "Everything I can. So someday when you have children, you can teach them." She thought about that. "You mean like how stories get passed down? Grandpa tells dad, dad tells kids, kids tell their kids." "Exactly like that. That's what legacy means. Building something bigger than yourself." Annie nodded seriously. "Then I'll pay attention real good, so I can pass it on right." The seasons turned and years passed in the way they do when life settles into contentment. The ranch prospered under Cole and Grace's joint management. They bought the adjacent property, expanded the herd to 500. Head hired 3 permanent hands to help with the work. Ethan grew tall and capable, his childhood thinness filling out into lean muscle. He was 15 now, doing a man's work and doing it well. He kept the ranch books with meticulous care, wrote articles for the territorial newspaper about modern ranching techniques, and had developed a reputation for being honest in his dealings. But what struck people most was the boy's loyalty to his father. He never called Cole anything, but the dad now said it with the kind of fierce pride that made clear he'd chosen the title deliberately. Annie at 10 was confident and kind in equal measure, known throughout the district for her way with younger children. She'd announced her intention to become a teacher, like the schoolmistress, Miss Caroline, and nobody doubted she'd succeed. The old rag doll she'd been clutching the day Cole found her sat on a shelf in her room, now treasured but no longer needed for comfort. She had real security now, the kind that came from knowing absolutely that the people around her would never leave. Cole at 37 was weathered from sun and work gray threading through his hair at the temples, but he moved with the confidence of a man who'd found his place. The bitterness that had driven him toward Montana all those years ago had burned away, replaced by something richer and more sustaining. Grace at 35 was his full partner in every sense, and if there was something more than friendship developing between them, they were both content to let it grow slowly naturally without forcing it into words. On October evening in 1888, 5 years after the trial, Cole stood on his porch watching the sunset and thinking about how far they'd all come. The children were inside doing homework, their voices carrying through the open window. Grace was at the main house preparing dinner. Hank was in the barn moving slower these days, but still insisting on doing his share. Peace. He'd built peace, Barnes. Then a rider appeared on the road from town and Cole recognized Samuel Henderson's horse. The sheriff dismounted with the careful movements of a man whose back hurt. He'd aged in the past 5 years, gotten grayer, moved stiffer, but his eyes were still sharp. "Got a letter for you," Henderson said, pulling an envelope from his coat. "Came through the territorial mail, from Colorado." Cole took it, saw the return address. William Walker, care of the Double Diamond Ranch, Colorado Springs. He'd gotten letters before birthday greetings for the children, brief notes at Christmas. But this was thicker, heavier, like it contained more than simple pleasantries. "You want me to wait while you read it?" Henderson asked. "Might be best." Cole opened the envelope, unfolded the pages inside, Blossom. William Walker's handwriting shaky but legible. The letter started with the usual greetings, asked after the children's health, thanked Cole again for taking care of them. Then the tone changed. "I'm writing to tell you I'm dying. Lung sickness, the doctor says. 6 months if I'm lucky, 3 if I'm not. I've made my peace with it. I've had 5 years of honest work and sobriety, 5 years of knowing my children are safe and loved. That's more than I deserved. But I wanted to see them one more time, to say goodbye proper, to thank you in person for being the father I couldn't be. I understand if you say no. I understand if they don't want to see me. But I'm asking anyway because a dying man gets to ask for grace. If you'll bring them to Colorado Springs, I'll pay for the travel. If you won't, I'll understand that too. Either way, know that you gave me something precious. You gave me the peace of knowing my children are with someone who loves them. Thank you, Cole Brennan, for stopping on that road, for being brave when I was a coward, for showing Ethan and Annie what a real father looks like. William Walker." Cole read the letter twice, then handed it to Henderson. The sheriff read it, his expression grave. "What are you going to do?" Henderson asked. "Don't know. Feels like the decision should be theirs. They're young to make that kind of choice. They're old enough to have opinions about whether they want to see the man who left them." Cole looked toward the house. "I'll ask them. Let them decide." That night after dinner, Cole gathered Ethan and Annie in the small cabin that had become their home. He read them the letter, watching their faces for reactions. Ethan's expression was unreadable, that carefully neutral mask he wore when processing difficult emotions. Annie's eyes filled with tears. "He's really dying?" she asked. "Sounds like it." "Do you think he's changed?" Ethan's voice was flat, controlled. "Do you think he's different than he was?" Cole thought about his own journey from bitter drifter to father, about how much a person could change when given the chance. "I think people can change. Doesn't erase what they did, but change is possible." He paused. "Question is, do you want to see him? I won't make you. This is your choice." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "He was our father. Even if he wasn't a good one, even if you're our real dad now, he was still the person we called Pa once. I think maybe he deserves a goodbye." "Annie," Cole looked at the girl, "I don't remember him very well anymore," she admitted. "When I try to think about what he looked like, I think about you instead." She clutched her ragdoll. "But if he's dying, and if saying goodbye would help him, then I think we should go." "You're sure, both of you?" They nodded, and Cole felt pride swell in his chest. These children he'd found abandoned and terrified had grown into people capable of grace, of forgiveness, of choosing kindness, even when it would be easier to choose anger. "Then we'll go. All 3 of us." The journey to Colorado Springs took 4 days by stage and rail. Grace insisted on coming too. Said someone needed to keep Cole from doing something foolish, but he knew it was because she cared about the children and wanted to support them. Colorado Springs was a mining town gone respectable, with wide streets and buildings that looked permanent. The Double Diamond Ranch where Walker worked was 10 miles out, a big operation running several thousand head. They found William Walker in a small cabin the ranch provided for its foreman. He was thinner than Cole remembered, his skin gray, his breathing labored. But his eyes were clear, and when he saw the children, they filled with tears. Ethan. Annie, you came. We came, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. Walker tried to stand, but his strength failed him. A woman appeared from the back room, maybe 40, with kind eyes and capable hands. This is Sarah, Walker said. My wife. She's been taking care of me. Sarah nodded to them, understanding this was a private moment. I'll make coffee, she said, and left them alone. Awkward silence filled the cabin. Then Annie, with the directness of children, asked, Does it hurt being sick? Sometimes, but Sarah gives me medicine that helps. Walker looked at her like he was memorizing her face. You've grown so much. You're beautiful. Grace teaches me things, and Dad braids my hair now even though he's not very good at it. Dad, Walker's voice broke on the word. That's good. That's right. He looked at Cole. Thank you for coming. I know this wasn't easy. They wanted to say goodbye. I won't deny them that. Can I talk to them alone, I mean? Cole looked at the children. Ethan nodded. Annie looked scared but determined. I'll be right outside, Cole said. You call if you need me. He and Grace stepped out onto the porch, leaving the children with their biological father for what might be the last time. Inside, through the thin cabin walls, Cole could hear Walker's voice, weak but earnest. I want you to know I think about you every day. Every single day, and I'm so proud of the people you're becoming. You don't know us anymore, Ethan said. We're not the same kids you left. I know, but I see strength in you. Courage. That had to come from somewhere. Maybe it was always there. Maybe I just didn't protect it the way I should have. Why did you leave us? Annie's voice was small. Was it because we were bad? No, God, no. You were perfect. You were everything good in my life. Walker's breathing was ragged. I left because I was weak. Because I let fear control me. Because I couldn't figure out how to keep you safe, so I made the worst choice possible. But you testified at the trial, Ethan said. That was brave. That was me trying to do one thing right after a lifetime of doing things wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. And I'm grateful you're with someone who's strong where I was weak. There was silence. Then Annie said, We forgive you. Annie, Ethan started, but she interrupted. He made mistakes, but everyone makes mistakes, and he's dying. He doesn't need our anger. He needs to know we're okay. She paused. We are okay, aren't we? We have Dad now. We have Grace and Hank and the ranch. We have a home, so maybe we can give him peace. Out of the mouths of children, Cole thought. Wisdom he'd spent decades learning, and she understood it at 10 years old. When they came back out, both children looked lighter somehow. Ethan had tears on his face, but his shoulders were straighter. Annie held her rag doll and looked peaceful. Can I talk to you? Walker asked Cole. Just for a minute. Cole went back inside, sat in the chair beside the bed. Walker looked worse up close, the sickness eating him from the inside. I need to know they'll be okay, Walker said. After I'm gone, I need to know someone will remember them, teach them about where they came from. I'll make sure they know their history, the good parts and the hard parts both. Will you tell them I love them? Even though I failed them, I love them. I'll tell them, and I think they already know. Walker reached out, gripped Cole's hand with surprising strength. You saved them. You gave them everything I couldn't. That makes you their real father. I know. But they gave me something too. They gave me the chance today, knowing I did one brave thing at the end. I stood up in that courtroom. I told the truth. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Cole said quietly. Your children know their father found courage when it mattered. That's a good legacy to leave. Walker died 6 weeks later. Sarah sent word by telegram along with a request that came from Walker's final wishes. He'd wanted to be buried in Wyoming territory near his children, so even in death he wouldn't be far from them. They buried him in the Clearwater Cemetery on a cold November day. Not many attended. Samuel Henderson and his wife, Grace and Hank, Tom Peterson, a few others who remembered William Walker before fear broke him. Ethan and Annie stood by the grave dressed in their Sunday clothes and watched the coffin lowered into the ground. Should we say something? Annie asked. If you want to. Ethan stepped forward. I don't remember much about when you were our pa, but I remember you used to sing to Annie when she couldn't sleep. And I remember you teaching me to rope. Those are good memories. I'm going to keep those. He paused. You made mistakes, but you also made us, and we're going to make you proud. We're going to be the people you hoped we'd become. That's our promise to you. Annie added her own words, simple and pure. Thank you for leaving us where Dad could find us. It was the best gift you ever gave us. As they walked away from the grave, Ethan said something that would stay with Cole forever. He was our father, but you're our dad. There's a difference. What's the difference? Cole asked. Father is the person who gave you life. Dad is the person who teaches you how to live it. Ethan looked up at him with absolute certainty. You're our dem. That's a choice we make every day. The years continued to pass, each one adding layers to the foundation they built. The ranch prospered beyond anything Grace and Cole had imagined. They expanded to 800 acres, ran 600 head of cattle, employed 5 permanent hands plus seasonal workers during Roundup. Ethan, at 16, was accepted to the Territorial Law School in Cheyenne, but he chose to stay home instead. Said he could learn everything he needed through books and correspondence courses, and he'd rather build the ranch with his dad than sit in classrooms with people who didn't understand real work. Cole was proud enough to burst. Annie, at 11, was helping Miss Caroline at the school, teaching the younger children their letters and numbers. She had a gift for it, the kind of patience and insight that couldn't be taught. Grace and Cole finally admitted what everyone else had known for years. They loved each other, not with the passionate intensity of young people, but with the deep, abiding certainty of two people who'd fought side by side and built something lasting together. They married quietly one spring morning in 1889, with just the children and close friends present. Ethan gave Grace away. Annie scattered wildflowers. Hank cried, though he denied it later. That Christmas, they gathered in the main house that was now officially Cole and Grace's home, though the children still had their rooms in both places. The tree stood tall and fragrant, decorated with strings of popcorn and paper stars Annie had made. Ethan gave Cole a leather-bound journal. I've been writing our story, he said, from the day you found us to now, so someday our kids will know how we became a family. Cole opened it, read the first lines. Cole Brennan was heading to Montana when he found us. He was running from failure and heartbreak, convinced his life was ending. He didn't know it was just beginning. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. Annie's gift was a drawing carefully framed. It showed all of them, Cole and Grace, and the children, and Hank, and even the family dog that had shown up one day and refused to leave. At the bottom, in Annie's careful handwriting, my forever family. Grace gave them all matching saddles, custom-made with their initials tooled into the leather. A statement of permanence, of commitment to the life they were building together. And Cole gave them something he'd been working on for months. Deeds to the ranch, legally updated to include Ethan Brennan and Annie Brennan as equal partners, alongside himself and Grace. This is yours, he said, now and forever. You're not just my children. You're my partners. And someday when I'm gone, this will be yours to pass down to your children. Ethan's hand shook as he held the papers. Dad, this is too much. It's exactly right. A legacy isn't just something you leave behind. It's something you build together. Cole looked at Grace, at the children, at the life they'd created from nothing but determination and love. We're building something that'll last. Something your children and their children will be part of. That's what family means. That evening, after the gifts were opened and the meal was eaten and the house was full of warmth and laughter, Cole found himself back on the porch where this whole journey had really begun. 5 years in this house, now 7 years since he'd found 2 children by a fence post. Grace joined him, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. You thinking about Montana? She asked. Sometimes, but only to realize how glad I am I never made it there. No regrets. Not a single one. He pulled her close. I thought losing the ranch meant losing everything. Turns out I lost one thing so I could find something better. We found something better, Grace corrected. You and me and those kids, we built this together. We did. Cole looked up at the stars, bright and cold in the winter sky. 7 years ago, I was broken. Had $17 and no future. Now I've got a family, a ranch, a legacy. How does that happen? I think it happens when you stop running and start building. When you make promises and keep them. When you choose love over fear. Grace smiled. And I think it starts with one choice. To stop at a fence post when you could have kept riding. Inside, they could hear the children laughing about something, their voices carrying through the walls of the home they had all built together. "Come on," Grace said. "It's cold out here and there's pie left over." But Cole stayed a moment longer, remembering. Two children waiting, a choice made, a promise kept. Everything else had followed from that. The porch dissolved around him, the stars shifting overhead, and Cole Brennan was 59 again, sitting with his grandson Marcus as the last light faded from the Wyoming sky. "That's how I became your grandpa," Cole said. "That's how I became a father, by choosing to stop when I could have kept writing." Marcus was silent for a long moment, processing the story. Then he asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped?" "Sometimes I'd have made it to Montana, probably. Found work in the mines or on a ranch. Made enough to get by. Grown old alone." Cole paused. "I'd have survived, but I wouldn't have lived. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Surviving is just getting through each day. Living is building something that matters, loving people who love you back, leaving the world better than you found it." He put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "You understand what I'm telling you, Marcus?" "I think so. You're saying family is about choosing to stay, about keeping promises even when it's hard." "That's exactly what I'm saying. Your great-grandfather William, he gave you life through your dad. But your grandpa Ethan, he gave you family. Same way I gave it to him." Cole gestured at the ranch spread before them. "This land, this legacy, it's built on one choice made 27 years ago. To stop, to stay, to fight for something bigger than myself." The sound of wagon wheels announced arrivals. Cole stood his joints protesting after sitting too long and watched as his son Ethan drove up with his wife Martha and their 3 children. Behind them came Annie with her husband and 2 daughters. Sunday dinner, a tradition that had started years ago and continued unbroken through seasons and years. Marcus ran to greet his cousins, already starting to retell the story Cole had just finished. The children clustered around, listening with the rapt attention of young ones hearing about adventures. Ethan dismounted, a man of 37 now, tall and confident, with Cole's steady way of moving and his mother Margaret's dark eyes. He'd become a prominent lawyer in Cheyenne while still maintaining his partnership in the ranch, defending the rights of children and families, using his own story to fight for others. "Telling the fence post story again?" Ethan asked, embracing Cole. Marcus asked. "It's a good story. Never gets old." Ethan paused. "Though you always leave out the part where you cried when the judge gave you custody. Man's entitled to his dignity. Not around family, he's not." Annie came up the porch steps, 32 years old and a respected school teacher, her daughters trailing behind like ducklings. She wrapped her arms around Cole with the easy affection of someone who'd never doubted love. "Grandpa Cole, tell us about the time you faced down Dobbs," one of her daughters begged. "Again, I told you that story last week. But it's so exciting, and you make the best voices." Grace appeared from the house, white-haired now, but still straight-backed, and strong apron dusted with flour from the biscuits she'd been making. She surveyed her family with satisfaction. "Food's ready. Everyone wash up." Awesome. They gathered around the long table that had been built to accommodate exactly this 3 generations eating together. Cole sat at the head with Grace beside him, Ethan and Annie and their families filling the seats, children wiggling and laughing, and being shushed by parents who were trying not to laugh themselves. Grace said the blessing, her voice steady and sure. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for this family, for the legacy of love that binds us together. We remember those who came before, who made choices that brought us to this moment. We honor their memory by living well, by loving fully, by passing down the lessons they taught us. Amen." "Amen," they echoed. The meal was chaos and joy, conversation flowing around and over itself, children telling stories, adults sharing news. Cole ate and listened and let the noise wash over him like music. After dinner, the men gathered on the porch, as was their custom. Ethan, his son-in-law, Daniel, and Marcus, who was just old enough to be included in the circle. "Dad," Ethan said, using the title that had come to mean everything, "I've been teaching Marcus about the law, about standing up for what's right even when it's hard." "Good. World needs more of that." "He asked me today what the most important thing you taught me was." Ethan looked at his father. "I told him it was about keeping promises, that a man's word is his bond." "That's the foundation of everything," Cole agreed. You make a promise, you keep it. You give your word, you stand by it. Doesn't matter if it costs you. Doesn't matter if it's hard. You keep your promises. Marcus leaned forward, eager to learn. Is that the cowboy code? Part of it. The code is simple, really. Help people in trouble. Keep your word. Stand for what's right, even when it's easier to walk away. Treat your animals well. Respect the land. Leave things better than you found them. Cole looked at his grandson. Your great-grandfather William taught me something important too, though he didn't mean to. He taught me what happens when fear makes you break your promises. When you run instead of standing. I learned from his mistakes as much as from his blood. Will you teach me everything, Grandpa? The whole cowboy code? I will, and you'll teach your children someday. That's what legacy means. Passing it forward. Inside, the women had gathered the children for pie and stories. Cole could hear Annie's voice rising and falling in the rhythm of a well-told tale. Grace laughed at something, the sound carrying through the open window. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple that Cole had watched for 27 years from this porch. This land that had started as Grace's alone, then became theirs, now belonged to the whole family. Mitchell Brennan Ranch, 800 acres of prime Wyoming grassland that would support his grandchildren and their children after them, all because he'd stopped at a fence post. Grandpa, Marcus's voice pulled him back from his thoughts. Yes, son. Do you ever regret not making it to Montana? Cole smiled. Not once. Montana was never the destination. It was just the direction I was running. But that dusty road in Wyoming, that fence post where two kids waited, that was my promised land. I just didn't know it until I stopped running. Ethan stood stretched. Come on, Marcus. Let's help your grandmother with the dishes. But I want to hear more stories. You'll hear them. We've got all the time in the world for stories. Ethan paused in the doorway. That's the thing about family, son. The stories never end. They just keep growing generation after generation. After they went inside, Cole sat alone with the gathering darkness and the memories of a lifetime. He thought about William Walker buried in the Clearwater Cemetery with a simple stone that read, Father of Ethan and Annie. Thought about Grace's first husband, James, whose diary had helped bring down Clayton Vance. Thought about all the people who'd played parts in this story, some heroes and some villains, and most somewhere in between. But mostly he thought about two children sitting by a fence post, waiting for someone to care enough to stop. He'd been heading to Montana to escape failure. Instead, he'd found his purpose. Had learned that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about the daily choice to show up, to stay, to fight for the people who mattered. The door opened, and Annie came out wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. She'd always been able to sense when he needed company. The kids are asking for the cowboy story again, she said. The one about you and Dobbs at the line shack. That story gets more dramatic every time I tell it. That's what makes it a good story. She sat beside him on the porch rail the way she used to when she was small. Thank you, Dad. For what? For stopping, for staying, for being brave when everything in you probably wanted to run. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't remember much about that day anymore, but I remember thinking when I saw you coming down the road, maybe this one will be different. Maybe this one will stay. I almost didn't, almost kept riding. But you didn't, and that made all the difference. She was quiet for a moment. I tell my students about you sometimes, when they're scared or think they can't do something hard. I tell them about a cowboy who was running from everything, who stopped to help two strangers who built a family from nothing but promises and hard work. I tell them that courage isn't being unafraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. Cole felt tears prick his eyes. At 59, he cried easier than he had at 32. Grace said it was because his heart had gotten bigger, had room for more joy, and therefore more everything else too. You're a good teacher, he said. I learned from the best. Annie stood, kissed his weathered cheek. Come inside. The kids want to hear the story, and it sounds better coming from you. He followed her into the house where 3 generations of family waited. The children gathered at his feet. The adults settled into chairs, all of them ready to hear the story they'd heard dozens of times before, but never tired of. Cole began the way he always did. It was the summer of 1883. I was heading to Montana, running from everything I'd lost when I saw something that changed my life. Two children sitting by a fence post waiting. The children leaned forward, captivated, even though they knew how it ended. Marcus especially hanging on every word. Cole told them about the drought and the desperation, about Dobbs and Vance, about the trial and the choices that had to be made. He told them about courage found in unexpected places, about promises kept, even when keeping them was hard. And he told them about legacy, about building something that would last, about passing down not just land and cattle, but values and stories, and the knowledge that family was the most important thing a person could have. When he finished, Marcus asked the question Cole had been waiting for. Grandpa, what's the most important thing I should remember from your story? Cole thought about it, thought about 27 years of lessons learned, mistakes made, victories won. Remember this, he said finally. Life is going to break you sometimes. It's going to take things from you that you thought you couldn't live without. And you're going to want to run to hide to protect yourself from ever being hurt again. He paused, looked around at the faces of his family. But the bravest thing you can do is stop running, is to open your heart even when it's been broken, is to make promises and keep them, to love people, knowing you might lose them, to build things, knowing they might fall apart. His voice grew stronger, because that's what separates surviving from living. Surviving is protecting yourself from pain. Living is accepting the pain as the price for joy. He pulled Marcus close, this grandson who carried the legacy forward. I stopped at a fence post when every instinct told me to keep riding, made a promise to two scared children when I had nothing to offer but my word. And from that one choice, this whole family grew. This legacy, this life that matters. So when life breaks you, and it will, remember that the breaking is where new things can grow. The stopping is where the journey really begins. The promise is where the family starts. Grace came to stand beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Ethan and Annie moved closer with their own families. 3 generations in one room, bound together not by blood alone, but by choices made and promises kept. We're not built by the easy times, Cole said quietly. We're built by the hard choices. By stopping when we could run, by staying when we could leave, by loving when we could protect ourselves. He looked at each of them in turn, burning this moment into memory. That's the legacy I want to leave you. Not this ranch, though it's yours. Not the money or the land or the cattle, but the knowledge that you come from people who chose love over fear, who kept their promises even when it cost them everything, who built something beautiful from broken pieces. That's what it means to be a Brennan. To be part of this family. We stop for people in trouble. We keep our word. We stand for what's right. We build legacies that last. Marcus nodded, understanding, settling into his young face. I'll remember, Grandpa, and I'll teach my kids someday. I know you will, son. I know you will. Later, when the families had gone home and the house was quiet, Cole and Grace sat together on their bed, too tired to do anything but hold hands and listen to the sounds of the ranch settling into night. Good day, Grace said. The best kind of day. You think Marcus really understood about the legacy? He will, maybe not all of it now, but someday when he's got children of his own and he's teaching them about promises and courage and family, then he'll understand. Cole paused. That's how it works. We plant seeds, they grow into trees. Those trees have their own seeds. Poetic for a cowboy. You bring out my thoughtful side. She laughed, the sound he'd been falling asleep to for years now. 27 years since you stopped at that fence post. Any regrets? Cole thought about Montana, about the fresh start he'd been chasing. Thought about the $17 and the broken dreams and the bitter heart that had been running from pain. Not a single one. That road, that fence post, those 2 children waiting. That was my destiny. I just had to be brave enough to stop running and start building. We built something good. We built something that'll last. That's all any of us can ask for. They were quiet for a while, just breathing together in the darkness. Then Grace said, I love you, Cole Brennan. I love you too, every day, a little more. Even though I snore, especially because you snore, reminds me I'm not alone. She laughed again, and they fell asleep like that, holding hands, 2 people who'd found each other in the aftermath of loss and built something beautiful from broken pieces. And on the porch, under stars that had watched 27 years of this family's story unfold, The wind moved through the cottonwoods and carried the promise of tomorrow. Cole Brennan had stopped at a fence post when he could have kept riding, and that choice had made all the difference.